Hey guys, Gelphase coming back. I know it took me forever to get as much info as possible on Halo Wars 2, and thanks to our good friends at Halo Follower. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, it's pretty easy, and they dig up a lot more interesting info than I can. But, at least with the info I can use, we're going to be doing a unit cap on factions. Since I've managed to search up just enough material to maybe figure out what our creative assembly fellows might be doing. Hopefully, I can get a rundown and maybe even help them out just a little bit on type of units that either we might expect to be seeing and units that maybe we want to see. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with the UNSC. Mainly just because the Covenant have a lot more to work with. There's a lot more stuff that has to be eyeballed in there, especially if Creative Assembly decides they want to make sure every single alien that has been in the Halo franchise put in there, because all of them are fairly useful in warfare. The idea is to try to fit them all in there. It's gonna be tricky, but I'm sure we can trust Creative Assembly. They've done some pretty complex stuff, and I think this will be at least fairly a walk in the park. So, the talk we're going to be doing is starting off with troops, then vehicles, then aircrafts, and then special units. And we're going to talk about the upgrades they might have, or they might come with, and what type of tactics they might be using, depending on how the game is built. There's definitely a lot of different types of RTSs out there, turn-based strategy, thanks to XCOM, all that mojo. So let's see if we can figure out what we can throw our ideas on. Starting with the first unit of troops, the infantry. Most common cannon fodder soldiers you'd see anywhere else. You know, you make dozens of them. They're sponge bullets. They're meant to kind of die.
What matters is the colony. He's willing to live for the colony. To fight for the colony. To die for the colony.
This guy's crazy.
Smoke weed every day. Smoke weed every day.
And harass the enemy in most cases. But they might be able to play more of a part, as we've seen in Halo Wars 1. If they manage to garrison towers or barricades and stuff, they can be quite a hassle even to vehicles, and even aircrafts for that matter. Maybe we can make this happen again, where we can put something a little more interesting on those facts. Starting off with upgrades. These upgrades, I usually do them in threes. And one that focuses on defense, one that focuses on speed, and then one that focuses on offense. Just kind of a higher percentage to give them. If anything, if it is done by a percentage, this is kind of probably how it would be done. So for defense on infantry units, I'd say something along the lines of, you know, padded armor, something that's not too heavy, something that's fairly light but still provides, you know, a 20 or 25% more of a defense. They can take a few more bullets, but that doesn't mean they're invincible. It's nothing more than a defense. And these research upgrades will be focused only on the units themselves. We still don't know what kind of research tree that Creative Assembly might make for these factions, but if we know anything, is that they will probably try to make it as diverse as possible. And who knows, if they really are going to try to make it as interesting as possible, where maybe, you know, just researching all your stuff and then just being super OP is just kind of, you know, it gets tedious, it's common, and you'd see it anywhere. Who knows, maybe they might try to make a research tree more along the lines of, like, Universe at War, having like 12 slots of research. However, you can only research 6 of those slots to their max. That is the max, like, amount that you can hold. If you want to research a different type of slot, you're going to have to de-research one of your used slots and replace it with one of those. And who knows what these research can provide, any types of offensive or defensive capabilities against either certain types of units, whether you be taking on UNSC, Covenant, Flood, or Prometheans. We might be seeing Prometheans possibly, not as a playable faction, but maybe as a neutral unit. I can only have my fingers crossed, however, that is speculation. Moving on to the list with the infantry. I call this one light gear. But you can call it like, adrenaline boost or speed boost, the same thing they had with Halo Wars 1. Of course, that affected all infantry units. This is going to affect just one particular unit. I call it light gear, maybe just because that kind of sounds a little more along the lines of what infantry would have. But gives them a speed boost. They move a lot faster until you start getting maybe better transportation, whether it be using the Pelicans or maybe some kind of APC. We'll have to stick with that for now. And then finally, now I definitely question myself a little bit on this, but again, we still don't know if Forerunner tech is going to be available. I would prefer to go with kinetic bolts, just because seeing that in action in Halo 5 and seeing all the types of weapons and variants they have, you'd think that this would obviously be, something that could definitely be implemented in Halo Wars 2. But until we have any confirmation on information of Prometheans or Forerunners in the battlefield, this kinetic bolt is probably going to be a little far away, just because that is repurposed Forerunner technology. That's stolen tech from the Forerunners, and we laced it up with our weapons. Yeah, we all know that. We're not going to play dumb. So I decided to go with hollow points, just because that if you've seen what hollow points can do to a target, even in the modern age, hollow points are still pretty deadly compared to just regular bald points. As like getting hit by one cause your arm to explode. So that makes them fairly dangerous, and maybe a decent upgrade nonetheless. Aside from that, 3 upgrades down, now tactic-wise. Now, tactics I would call more along the lines of command. And with Halo Wars 1, infantry did have a command, whether it was throwing grenades or shooting rocket launches. But personally, I think that is something that should have been put as an automatic feature, and maybe there can be some research done to, give them better grenades or a missile launcher. I'm saving the missile launcher, however, for another particular unit. We'll go into detail on that later. But I would like to see it as more along the lines of an automatic feature. Doesn't mean that it's always going to hit the target, as we've seen in plenty of first-person shooters, and even with a little bit of Halo Wars, as you give them commands to either throw grenades or shoot rocket launchers, they don't always hit their target. So maybe putting it as an automatic feature isn't a bad thing. Enemy units will dive, and they will roll out of the way. That is something kind of expected. We've seen it all the time in Halo, in the Halo franchise, of all combat, whether it's 2, 3, or 4, showing that the enemy does react to weapons. And that could be pretty cool to see, if they can make little foot soldiers react to gunshots or grenades. That'd be pretty cool to see. So instead of a tactic-wise of just commanding throwing grenades, since if it does get put as an automatic feature, it was kind of an automatic feature when you garrisoned them into buildings. It was automatic. You didn't have to give them a command. They just do it right off the get-go. But I think with infantry, just because they are a sponge bullet unit, maybe they can use a more defensive strategy. So I call this one deploy barracks or barricades. Now, not a whole lot of RTS games ever did this, except maybe just like 2 or 3. Well, at least the ones that I played. Command & Conquer did this, where your common foot soldier units could create barracks that they could garrison themselves in. And basically, it was a big sponge bullet itself. As long as that it remained intact, even if they were shooting at it, none of the infantry would take any damage. Unless you took a flamethrower to it. We'll go into detail on that later. Or, instead of making a barracks that you garrison in, or maybe make something else, maybe some kind of barricade. We've seen in plenty of the Halo combats that as Covenants would assault UNSC bases, there would be sandbags, and there would be those huge plated pylon systems set to defend, take on plenty of fire. And even with like Halo 3 ODST, they made those huge cement walls that you could easily walk by, but they were obviously put there not just to deal with maybe enemy fire, but probably vehicle fire as well. Whether it's wraiths or tanks, that's basically what they served. easily for troops to get through, but as for vehicles, it was a huge barricade. There's no way a tank or a wraith could go right through that as long as those barricades remained intact. They would have to really grind against that in order to have any chance of getting across that area. So put in that perspective, and in a way, basically these barricades would provide, I'd say, more of a different kind of defense. There would be a defensive icon maybe put on the infantry, as their standard formation as they walk around will take a completely different formation when they are near cover. However, that cover can be destroyed, but they do use that cover nonetheless. And, you know, that would be a cool automatic feature. Compared to them just standing up and shooting, they would actually start ducking and dodging fire and taking shots. Make it Gears of War style, you know. They are shooting, but they're taking cover as a precaution, because they don't want to get shot at. You would react if you got shot at out in the open. You wouldn't be standing there taking it. Simple as that. Alright. Well, with the infantry out of the way, time to move on to the next unit. I call these ones the Hellbringers. Well, personally, I believe in Halo Wars 1, they were called Flamethrowers, but I think I'll go with Hellbringers. I think Hellbringers is a cooler name. I think it has a lot more perspective to it. So, with Hellbringers, obviously the Flamethrower units, what type of upgrades would we expect these guys to have? Now, Hellbringers, they were pretty slow in the Halo Wars 1. And they didn't have a whole lot of range. I think there was a lot more tactics that these guys could have been given.
The flamethrower had other limitations.
Flamethrower's heavy. It doesn't carry a lot of fuel. It's only a few seconds of burn. It's a tool in the inventory. It's very useful in the situations where it works well, but it has distinct limitations.
If you're going to be a flamethrower, there's definitely going to be one issue, is obviously you're going to be pretty slow and sluggish, so they're going to need some real heavy defenses. So instead of padded armor, I call this one plated armor. Plated armor is just full-on metal plates bolted onto their suits. And they can take a lot more hits. This would be more along the lines like a 50 or a 60% defense. And because they're so slow, they can at least take more hits from bullet fire that is being shot at them. So on and so forth. Next on there would be... This would be focusing on, obviously, napalm was always put on Halo Wars 1. And basically that was just lingering burns. Even if the flamethrowers or the Hellbringers were killed off, whatever kind of burns that they would leave behind after already at least spreading their fire along enemy units would continue to linger and continue to damage units until it probably killed them, depending on how long it would take for it to dissipate. I'm sure the time frame will be fairly long, just to kind of make things a little more interesting. And then the third one, I'm kind of questioning it still a little bit. I think this would probably be better to be put on a research tree, but, you know, I'll just go throw this idea out there. An extended pipe thrower. I guess I just made that word up, but basically, flamethrowers now have a longer range of shooting it. It would like be a 20 or 30% more range of fire. If you've seen actual real flamethrowers shot, they got some range, even especially when they're laced up with tanks. Holy crap, those things have got some range. And it just shows you that they are devastating units and could probably even break down the morale of their enemies. You know, we all seen what happens when you take out a brute chieftain or an elite captain in the amongst of a bunch of grunts. Their morale completely just shatters to zero, and most of them will either freak out or maybe one or two might go on a suicide run. Something to think about. I did not decide to include flashbang as a command or an upgrade, just because that type of upgrade I think is just doesn't seem like a whole lot of tactic could be used to that. It's only used on units. It's useless against vehicles. It doesn't really seem to kind of really play a huge part. And we want these guys to play a huge part, so I decided to go with something else. Another type an actual napalm grenade or a firebomb. Maybe something they can focus a large mass of fire burst into their flamethrower and just shoot it as a ball that could cause area damage. And speaking of area damage, when I was talking in past of Halo Wars thoughts that cover could be used, whether it be the cover that you deploy or cover that's might be already set out in the field, like dense brush, jungles, or trees provide cover. They could provide defensive cover. They could provide low visibility cover, where you can still see the enemy, but they may not be able to see you until they get a lot closer. That type of cover. And if you got like a dozen guys taking pot shots at your soldiers, and you know that they're in that forest or that dense bush, you think the idea would be to just send some infantry in there to go flush them out, but it could be a trap. You know, you never know. Maybe the enemy wants you to do that, and they might have mines or traps, or maybe some melee units or shotgun units waiting in for you to rush in on them, and they would just freaking just blow right through your guys, just smoke all of your soldiers that you thought maybe there was only a few units in there, maybe there were more units in there. And you never know what you might find in the bush.
Is it your special bush?
Never mind, forget it. I really don't feel like getting stabbed tonight.
The point is that if you want to maybe avoid an incident like that, maybe send the Hellbringers to just burn the forest down, just burn the brush down. It's a flamethrower unit, so it would obviously be fairly useful for clearing out barracks. If there's any enemies that are garrisoned inside buildings, it would probably just take them out just right like that, and that would be a nice effect. And if they are in some dense forest or bush, you could just start setting the forest on fire. Heck, that was a feature in a few other RTS games, including even Lord of the Rings: Battle for Middle Earth. The visibility was really low when enemies were actually in forests. It was a little visibility bonus where they could still see you, but you may not be able to see them unless you get like right into that brush, and then you'd be able to see them. But you don't know what's in there, and maybe a safer precaution would be to just set it on fire and either flush them out or they can just die in there. It shows that the Hellbringer units will probably play a huge role. Even when you have vehicles at the access point, they may not play a huge role if enemies are taking cover in huge thick brush and trees, because tanks cannot roll through that. I mean, they can probably roll down a few trees, but I'm sure the trees that they'll probably have in here are probably going to be the size of redwoods, and we both know even the strongest tanks cannot mow down a full-sized redwood. That's a big tree, indeed. But aside from that, that's now finished with the Hellbringers. Moving on. Now we're going to be moving on to units that I've kind of made up myself. Just kind of thoughts, maybe units that we'd like to see. We never got to see snipers. We only got to see the rebel units use them, and they didn't really have much range, unfortunately. I expected that they would have had a lot more range. They would be shooting at your infantry before you started shooting at them, but this was not the case. The infantry managed to shoot at them just at the same time as they were doing it too, and that just shows, okay, that was poor decision making there. Snipers are supposed to have a long range of fire. Should be able to shoot people nearly half a mile away before they start getting shot at themselves. So maybe if they decide to put sniper units in there, they will make sure to have this as an effect. Obviously, snipers will have longer range because they're snipers. And no doubt, if there's anything I've known when I played Halo 5, is that sniper weapons are only good for long range. If enemies start getting closer, the likelihood of you missing is a lot higher. And maybe that could be as a percentage too. Snipers are only good as far range. If the enemies start getting close, they're going to have to back off because they're going to keep missing if they keep shooting.
What the hell am I supposed to do with this inside a Covenant ship?
What type of upgrades would we expect snipers to have, however? Well, I guess one would be talking about second scope. A little word I made up. Second scope would obviously increase their range. They would get a much higher range of seeing what type of enemies would be around. And then next upgrade, I would call this armor piercing. And of course, that would mean that now snipers can probably hurt vehicles a lot more. I would say it would be an automatic command if they were taking on infantry, and if vehicles were coming by, I would take that out. I would take that as no, don't have them automatically attack enemy vehicles, because it's almost pointless. They could probably damage them very, very little. This was kind of a feature that was put into Command and Conquer, where they could only shoot automatically at enemy infantry. And to keep their visibility, to keep themselves hidden, they would not shoot at vehicles, because vehicles would do very little damage, and they would just give away the position and get themselves freaking run over or killed. And that's not productive at all. But with at least armor piercing upgrade, that might give them an edge at doing a little bit more damage. I'd say more along the lines of maybe the smaller vehicles. I don't see it as super effective against tanks. However, I have dropped a few tanks before in Halo 5 with a sniper rifle. It can be done, and it just shows that if they were laced with armor piercing, yeah, they can wreck a tank up for sure. But an option nonetheless. And now, final upgrade, I'd call this one the Mobile Cover. Now this one basically just acts as kind of almost like a cloak, where as long as they can shoot from a very far away distance and will not be noticed by the enemy still. However, I'm sure there'll probably be some sort of radar alerts depending on what type of systems upgrades that the Covenant or the UNSC might use to try to help alert and avoid incidents like that. But nonetheless, this mobile cover would be like just having a whole bunch of brush put on our snipers to make them less visible to see on the battlefield. That would be a cool feature nonetheless. Now, for command, what type of command should snipers have as a tactic? Tried to figure out many different types. Headshot could be cool, but technically I think they already kind of have that. As they are already snipers, they will kill infantry units right off the get-go. Maybe something else might work. Maybe how about marking targets? In certain other games, snipers played a really huge role, realizing that they were not just deadly against infantry, they could be super deadly towards vehicles and even structures. Not by themselves, but what they do is they provide intel. They provide intel. Maybe they could set off a beacon or something. Or set off a spot or have visual intel on enemy positions. And that might be able to make room for maybe an artillery unit. Could start just laying siege. An artillery unit is pretty effective. It'll probably have fairly long range as it is, but could definitely have a lot more range if there's a unit that provides intel for them. Where maybe they could just barely shoot, just a good enough few miles away from wherever they are just by being able to see, but they could probably shoot dozens of miles away if there's a sniper out there that's providing intel for that unit. And as long as that unit remains in cover and is not seen and is not engaging the enemy, he's just providing visual intel for the artillery unit to just keep on laying waste. And no doubt any other good RTS player, if noticing this is happening, they obviously are going to have to send some infantry units out there and find where that sniper is, because he's basically the problem. He's providing the intel, he's providing line of sight for the artillery unit. Take that guy out, and now the artillery unit is less dangerous. But an idea nonetheless. Next on the list of units, ODST. Now, we've seen ODST in Halo Wars 1. You've seen them as a higher upgraded infantry unit. Now, why did I choose this unit to be a separate unit from infantry? Mainly because ODSTs, their tactics are a little bit different than the common Marines. A lot more so, and I think might earn their rights to be a separate unit. Because, for starters, as cold ODST, Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, these guys are definitely a much higher rank of military infantry, but they are they're more like an infiltrator unit. Almost like the sniper, but unlike the sniper, they get shot way behind enemy lines most of the time. And because of that, they're going to have to be provided with specialized gear to be able to keep themselves alive. And if memory serves well, when we've seen Halo 3 ODST, they were definitely like a stealth force in most cases. And one of the nice things for their upgrades, noticed, is that they do have silencers laced onto their weapons, whether it be the pistol or the SMG. I think that would make a nice, good upgrade to start with. It would make it much quieter for them to take out enemy units, as I'm sure that they will probably not have assault rifles. They'll probably have, BRs or DMRs or something that can kill enemies fairly quick. Obviously, with like grunt units and jackals, units that do not have personal shields will probably get dropped real quick by these guys. And as for elites and brutes, they'll probably take a decent amount of fire, but they will eventually probably fall just as fast, depending on what kind of upgrades you can give your ODST. Next on the list, I call this one Enhanced Visor, or Enhanced Visual. Now, seeing in Halo 3 ODST, most of the mission was focused during the night. And during that nighttime, probably didn't have very good visibility, so you had to switch your visor. Now, this does not mean like it's going to be straight up night vision all the time, though it probably would be pretty cool if Halo Wars has a day and night cycle. That'd be pretty sweet. But this vision would mainly focus on just being able to notice units. Kind of think of it more along the lines of a motion tracker, where ODSTs can detect enemy units before they actually come in visual range. And a few other RTS games did this as well. A few games like StarCraft or Command & Conquer, I believe, has done that too. Using motion trackers, you could actually see the enemies. They would be little blips or icons way out there. And it just shows like, okay, there's an army out there, or there's a small platoon out there. The ODSTs can see them as soon as they get close enough to their position before they actually see them, if that makes any sense. But that would be a pretty cool thing to set up. It would show that ODSTs are definitely the next level step of infantry, but still as a separate unit, as they are not going to be building barricades or anything. They're not doing all the labor work. They're an infiltrator unit. They could probably do the same job almost as the snipers.
Hey, you. They're inside the perimeter. It's a big fucking signal. 12 meters, 11, 10, 9 meters, 8 meters, 7, 6. It's reading right, man.
And then last but not least, their final upgrade, I call this one Dragon Armor. Now, I did steal this off of future weapons, but this type of upgrade would be very different. It's not just a defensive upgrade that would just focus on defense. It would provide two kind of defenses, as what I've studied on what this armor actually really serves. It still would provide, maybe a 20% defense against fire, but it would provide a 50% better defense against explosives. So that would include even vehicles using explosive rounds, wraiths or tanks, or enemy units that have rocket launchers or fuel rod cannons. They would have a much higher defense against this type of weapon, because this armor is mainly focused on dealing with explosives and not so much gunfire. But it does provide a little extra defense. In a way, two birds with one stone. One defense that focuses on fire, another one that focuses on explosives. It's a nice little add-up. And now for their tactics. It was a little difficult to figure this one out just because there's a lot I've seen what ODSTs can do. One is that they could deploy mines. As we've seen in ODST, that there was a part where you had to take out a bridge. And clearly, in the ODST ranks, they had explosive experts that knew how to use explosives and traps and mines to either cut off enemy support, or cut them from trying to get towards areas, or simply just laying down traps to kind of lengthen their limits and give them more time to regroup in a way.
What?
This day ain't turning out so bad after all.
And another thing that they could possibly have as a tactic is weapon swapping. And ODSTs would carry more than just, your common SMG or a pistol. I could imagine ODSTs as the kind of unit that could carry a rocket launcher or even a shotgun. As the ODSTs are no stranger to close quarters combat, you could definitely see these guys getting up and close with Covenant units.
I'd like to keep this handy for close encounters.
Exactly.
And I haven't came up with a close quarter unit until now, so I'd say, the ODST kind of fits the bill as a close quarter combat unit. Aside from Spartans, which we'll certainly get to very soon. But nonetheless, those are the tactics I'd give to an ODST that would sound fair and balanced.
Get this thing off of me.
Moving on now to the Spartans, of course. Spartans are almost a lot like the ODSTs, but they are more along the lines of a demolition unit. And they can cause a lot more havoc. These are the kind of guys you'd send to the front lines. You don't expect these guys to be infiltrators a whole lot. Unless there's some kind of research that gives them that ability. Which I'm sure we've seen in a few Halo games, or even movies, that they've participated in special sneak attacks and special missions and all that mojo. Moving on, let's get to their upgrades. Again, what would probably focus on a good, decent defense is we've always heard about Spartans having this gel layer put into their suits, which basically kind of provides a real good, decent buff of defense. It helps them move around a lot easier and helps them move around in this really, really heavy armor that they carry. It's a lot heavier and stronger than any other armor that the UNSC uses. That's why Spartans only use it and nobody else. So maybe something like double gel layer would provide even more of a defense, as these guys could probably take hits from maybe even rocket launchers, or no doubt they are Spartans, but they're not super invincible either. They can still probably get killed off by probably large vehicles if they are not careful. But of course they also can hijack them. That just makes them even more dangerous. Now, next upgrade is that we've seen Spartans actually use melee combat. So we know ODSTs like to get close enough with their shotguns, but not probably using so much melee combat as that Spartans love using melee combat. So maybe a nice upgrade would be martial combat, I guess you could call it. There's many other names I'm sure you can get, but this would enhance their combat skills against combat units, or maybe if they just feel like they want to attack them with melee themselves, which can happen. I've seen it done in Halo Wars with the Spartans. If you moved them closer towards units, they would actually start punching and do probably just as much damage, or if more. Or maybe they might kind of make it more along the lines with Warhammer or Dawn of War, where they can continuously assault, going forward and shooting at them until they get close enough to them, and then start using melee combat. This will clearly increase their melee combat much more efficiently. Maybe they'll start using bayonets or something. And then their final upgrade, I guess, would be kind of focusing on offense on their guns. I call this one spread shot. It was hard to figure out what kind of third upgrade would be decent for Spartans. I decided to put spread shot in just because Spartans have used many different types of really damaging weapons, whether it's the Gatling gun, gas cannon, or Spartan laser. Obviously, we're going to see Spartans using Spartan lasers. It would seem only right for Spartans to only use those and nobody else, because that's why they have the name, because maybe they have a lot more backfire than rocket launchers. But spread shot would help in a way that they could shoot at multiple targets, not just one. Even though they'll be killing those units really fast, they could just spread shot it, and they'll start damaging almost all units. maybe in a slower manner, but nonetheless all units are getting damaged by that spread shot. Now, for commands that Spartans could have, it was really hard to figure this one out, because obviously one would be, you know, hijacking vehicles. We could see them hijacking vehicles again, and no doubt that'll probably be put as a feature. They could also do weapon swapping too, as that we've seen them carry a large number of different kinds of weapons, whether it's dual wielding SMGs or the Gatling gun or the Spartan laser. Maybe they can make it more interesting, as Gatling guns are fairly effective against troop units and not super effective against vehicles. Not like a Spartan laser would. A Spartan laser would just tear that up with like 1 or 2 shots. So maybe you can choose whatever weapon you want to give them. And it doesn't have to be like a permanent effect. You know, it could be either applied to the unit or maybe some sort of facility that provides the weapon swapping for them. In a way, this would help kind of balance things. Like, what do you want your troops to have? What would make them most effective in a certain area? If they are in close quarter areas, maybe give them a shotgun. If they're in further long range areas, give them a BR or DMR or a sniper rifle, depending on what they might be fighting. That sort of thing, and those sort of strategies. But enough on that. This video has already gone on for probably half an hour, and I'm going to save the information on vehicles and aircrafts and special units on a separate video, and it'll be a little bit quicker, at least, just because a few of the units I've noticed are already basically in the making. There's no guarantee, but just speculation, and since these units have already been possibly confirmed, no doubt their abilities will already be given by the producers. So we'll just talk about them since we've already seen them, and we'll figure out maybe what part they'll be playing in the war. Alright, other than that, this is Gelphase, digging more information on Halo Wars 2, signing out. See you guys.
Transmission from orbit around Algolis. Cold protocol enforced. All weapons prototypes and accompanying navigational databases eliminated. The soldier I previously recommended for military court-martial is... I rescind and redact that portion of my earlier report. That soldier is officially missing in action, lost during heavy combat on Algolis. He demonstrated honorable conduct not only as a Marine, but also as a human being.